Geek Out! Hey, welcome to another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
And this week, oh boy, have we got an interview for you.
It was wild.
It was indeed. We've got James Robinson on the show talking about his Image Comics book, The Saviors, which he does with J-Bone. It's collected this month, this Wednesday, October 26th, out in comic shops everywhere and on Comixology. Would you call this possibly the finest interview we've ever done?
I don't want to exclude other people we've had because we've had so many wonderful people on here, but
one of the finest.
One of definitely the finest interviews we've ever had, and it's because of his willingness to be brutally honest and talk about whatever, and nothing's off limits.
Yeah.
Like it was all him that helped make this interview as good as it is.
Mm-hmm.
We were just the idiots along for the ride.
And I think it's the first time that all three of us have had one thing to equally legitimately geek out on with whoever we're interviewing. I had my League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I mean, we'll get into it. You'll hear the interview, but we all had a moment where we got to geek out with this guy.
And there's no higher praise. So let's listen to it. And joining us this week, we've got comic book writer James Robinson. His book, The Saviors, comes out on Wednesday, October 26th through Image Comics. James, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So, The Saviors, obviously there's a bit of a sci-fi twist with this. You've got Thomas Ramirez, this kind of slacker stoner figure in a southwestern American town that finds him kind of in this... they live / the day the earth stood still scenario. What were some of your influences kind of cracking this sci-fi conspiracy story?
They live in the day the world stood still.
There you go.
But no,
as per usual, Sam's right on the money.
A variety of things, really. I mean, one of the things definitely was those 1950. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which I used to live in Sierra Madre in California, very near to Pasadena. Lived there for quite a few years. And its claim to fame was that it was, the main place in an invasion of the body snatchers. So it's sort of always in my mind. But that kind of paranoia. And whereas that was very obviously, the original invasion of the body snatchers was very obviously, 50s paranoia, and I think I'm right in saying I should have this information readily available, but I think the director or the filmmakers were trying to make a comment that was anti-McCarthyism, I believe.
That would make sense.
People just blindly following their leaders. And I think, quite honestly, today, if you look at today's, political arena, it's kind of the same thing going on now, where people are just blindly following people and not questioning and not asking and doing all the things that human beings should do to in terms of their lives and in terms of their political leaders, and especially Americans, where you fought for your freedom and you should try and maintain that and not give it over surreptitiously. He says very politically on when I should just be talking about comic books. But anyway, hang on a second, that's my dog. So that was kind of the inspiration, was that those kind of, and also things like Them, that Ant movie, all of those movies where people are basically taking fears. I mean, Them was the parallel was radioactivity and the untold horrors of the atom bomb and all that was going on in the 50s. So all of that was sort of in my head. The fears we have, the paranoia we have, the fact that I think we all are losing control. We all feel to some degree that we've lost control of our lives through, what's going on in the world with terrorism, with politicians that are clearly in it for themselves in England, in America, all over the world. We aren't really being protected. And so all of that was in my head as I was kind of coming up with Saviors. And then on top of that, I have a confession to make, which is the TV show, what's it? I forget what it's called now. The Ancient Aliens one with what's the guy's name? I should know this guy. What's that?
Giorgio Tzeklis?
Tsoukalos.
Yeah.
Giorgio Tsoukalos.
Yeah. So, it's Ancient Aliens.
So I went to a live show that he did, expecting to be thoroughly entertained with a lot of nonsense. It was actually 2.5 hours. It's like going to a Springsteen concert, but with a crazy Greek guy that, you know, wants to talk about ancient aliens. But what I found very interesting almost immediately is he said, if you look at the show, when they talk about, you know, Nazis trying to get aliens to bring them dinosaurs and all that stuff, he says, I'm never on any of those shows. He said, all I want to talk about is that the aliens, that I believe aliens landed on Earth many, you know, countless whenever thousands of years ago. And as a result, there are things that we can't explain through physics that they may have done to our world. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go and look at this with an open mind. And but I'll be damned if that Greek bastard didn't convince me. So in the course of it, he was talking about ancient texts in South America, talking about about a particular herb that they had brought to Earth. And I said to George myself at the thing afterwards, I said, could you be talking about marijuana? And he said, you know what, I never thought of that before, but quite possibly. And then, of course, they just did a study and they found that they can't link the marijuana to any other plant. So with that, an octopus is not being linked to animals or something. I forget what that was about, but they've recently said that octopuses or squids are a different thing than other animals. I was like, oh, maybe there's some truth to all this stuff that things happened in the past. So anyway, the idea that clarity of vision comes from smoking pot, which again ties in with ancient with American shaman and smoking wampum and not wampum, smoking
peyote,
and what's the other Jimson weed to attain a higher level of clarity. All of that was sort of in my mind. And like you say, they live, it's a lot easier when you put on a pair of cheap sunglasses and you're Roddy Piper. but that same kind of thing. But then also, the fun I was going to have down the line would be that you would begin to get into the heads of the aliens as well and see that perhaps they've sort of lost their way, but their intentions are for the best, and they actually want to save the Earth from all the crap that is happening to it now because of, big business and politicians caring about themselves and getting elected more than they do about the people they're supposed to be taking care of.
Which is why they elect to go more. I always find it interesting that a lot of alien things like They Live, again, for example, or Invasion of the Body Snatchers, there's a lot of, despite them theoretically having superior technology, they employ so much subterfuge to kind of achieve their goals. Was that kind of... I suppose you kind of answered the question already, but that's kind of what they're doing there to make sure to save the Earth from itself.
Well, in the Saviors, what it is they've realized that, like any invading force, there is resistance to any invading force. So the only way that you can be an invading force and take control of a community or a country or what have you is through conquest and quashing that resistance before you can do anything to change it for the good or bad. So their strategy is, instead of conquering it through force and what would have been Victorian spaceships when they were landing, they decided to take the form of humans and try and change the world from within. So that was, the premise, and you would have seen, with issue 6, the next one that would follow the collection, that would have been the equivalent of a times past, much like I did in Starman, when I would do these stories set in the past of Opal City, that would show life on Earth much earlier. The first one was taking place in the 1870s in New York. So there would be you would see how these aliens arrived, how they took over human form, but also as the series would go on, you'd kind of see how they'd gotten used to living on Earth and they liked it. They'd taken Earth wives and husbands, which also means that there would be little half aliens running around that didn't realize they were half aliens. There was a whole world of complexity that was sort of ahead for the Saviors.
Now, you mentioned earlier about the kind of the fears and the idea that we're, for lack of a better term, kind of becoming more sheeple. Was Tomas, at least at the outset of the series, kind of representative of that apathy, of that willingness to conform without any questions asked?
Well, I think, yes, partly to your question, but I think that there are two kinds of people that are a danger to the world currently. One is, as you put it, the sheeple, the people that are willing to follow and they are willing to basically take one side or the other, almost myopically in a tribalist way. And I'm English. Let's get all the cards on the table. I'm English. I live in America, and I've made a good life myself here. I'm not saying America is a bad country or anything else, but at times it bothers me, and I'm sure it bothers any intelligent person, how. And we will get back to your question, so bear with me. But it bothers me how people choose a side in politics, and that's it. They don't question anything that side does. The other side's wrong, and it's like black and white. It's like Spy versus Spy in Mad Magazine, where there's no logic to why you don't like what the other person does. It's just it's wrong. It's Democrat or it's Republican, And I grew up in England at a time, I think, when politicians had to be a little bit more accountable to what they do. They couldn't get away with some. I mean, Cheney making $9 billion off Blackwater security. Any politician who becomes a billionaire from starting a war and costing Americans their lives. That seems like a war crime to me. That definitely doesn't seem like something that any politician should be allowed to do, is to make themselves a billionaire off the lives of the people of that country.
Completely destabilizing.
Maybe I'm crazy, but that's how I feel.
No, totally.
So there are these people who are sheeple, as you put it, that just follow on and they don't question. But then there's the other kind of people that are equally as bad, and they're just people who don't give an F. They just don't care. These people now. This is kind of a crazy time for American politics, because I don't know that anybody truly believes Clinton is the best choice for president, but the other option is Trump, who's a Looney Tunes. So what are you going to do? You either vote for the better of the two that might not be the best one, but at least better than the other one, or you sit back, say it's not my concern, I don't get involved in politics, and when the world is even more crap than it is now, because it's a politician who doesn't care about you, he just cares about lining his pockets or helping his buddies. When that's going down, you're as much to blame as the people that voted for him, or the ones who didn't vote or didn't do anything. So Thomas is one of them. He's happy to get high, smoke pot, have wonderfully self-indulgent conversations with himself or with lizards or whatever, or just about nothing, but he's forced to take action and become, and he, what's that old saying? Greatness is some people are born great, some strive for it, and some people have it foisted on him. He's that third kind of person. He's destined to be one of mankind's saviors. But he has to find his way, and luckily, one of the things that allows him to be a savior is he gets to smoke copious amounts of marijuana.
It's the dream minus all the alien homicide.
Yeah.
Where do you guys live? What part of?
Honestly, it's kind of cool. You talking all the political stuff. We live right outside of Washington D.C.
Oh, well, Washington, D.C.'s legalized marijuana, hasn't it?
It has. I'll walk from the ballpark and I'll pass like 3 guys like token up. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you have your marijuana card, or are you still thinking about getting one?
Well, for the sake of for public dissemination, I don't have a card or any dispensary, but every now and then, like Baskin Robbins, you'd like to have the free sample.
Yes, absolutely. So that was probably too personal a question. I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to work out what kind of
I mean,
comic fans can be very cool, but you'd be surprised how many comic fans are incredibly square too. So I was just trying to work out what kind of people I was talking to.
Oh, personal, James. We haven't even started talking Airboy yet. You know, we're gonna get personal.
Oh well, you can. I have nothing to hide, and I think that one of the problems often with comics is that comic creators hide behind superheroes, or they hide behind. There isn't enough of themselves in comics. So yeah, you can talk about Airboy. I'll tell anything you want. Anyway.
Oh wow. I mean, this isn't me just getting my nose brown, though I've been known to do it on the show. But I thought it really was kind of incredibly brave. How much? Because it starts out and it's kind of like I suppose it's farcical to the end, but there is such a shift around the second or third issue. It just to put so much of yourself on the page, talking about the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or talking about, your marriage. I thought it was just it was one of the most heartbreakingly good reads that I'd had in a good long while.
Well, thank you very much. I genuinely appreciate you saying that and feeling that. I feel that, however, I feel that what you have just said to me kind of inadvertently shows a slight weakness in comics. Because I think, if I was writing a prose book, I mean, how many, what are the corrections, how many of these books, all of Hunter S. Thompson, there are so many books that play around with fiction and non-fiction and everything else, and certainly to a degree in films even. And, I think, people that know me well know that I don't pay myself a lot of compliments, but I do think for a mainstream creator, I kind of pushed the envelope a little bit, but I'm surprised that I did it. I mean, I'm surprised that I did it. I'm surprised that more people hadn't done it before me. I mean, really, the closest, but by the way, I should stress that I am not ignoring people who are doing comic books, small press comics. I've said in the introduction, one of my huge inspirations, one of my loves in comics is Chester Brown, and how autobiographical he gets. And same with Joe Matt. I mean, those guys would have been doing that stuff for like 20 years, 30 years. But in terms of like mainstream comics, not a lot of people have done it. I mean, the closest I can think of really was be something like Flex Mentallo by Grant Morrison. But even that there was much more allegory, and we had to make that leap as the reader to try and work out what was fiction and what was perhaps he was drawing from his past. But I mean, Flex Mentallo was a while ago, and maybe I'm missing some important works, but nothing's popping up. And I wish there was more stuff like that. I would like to know what beats in the dark soul of Peter David, or I shouldn't pick on Peter. Actually, that was a joke. Peter David's a nice guy,
yeah,
but I just
Mark
mean like
or something.
learning more about these creators and their work would be cool, and how they feel and all of that, So thank you for the compliment, but I wish you had made that compliment, 5 years ago to some other creator, because there was so much of this kind of work out there. And maybe after Airboy there will be more, although people either love it or they're completely freaked out by it. So that's what I'm learning about the book. So with that regard, I might have scared away any other creator from doing it. We'll see.
Well, I mean, one of the things I always look for in any kind of artist, musician or writer or anything, is that willingness to push the envelope. And, I quote this all the time on the show, but I had this old theater teacher in college who her mantra was like, be bold. Like, it doesn't matter, what, just make a choice and be bold with it. And, like you were saying and Sam was saying with Airboy, I think that was something totally, and I can't guarantee anything, but there has to be somebody out there who read that and that just tapped into something, and they're something's boiling in there, because like Sam was saying, it's such a bold, brave kind of pushing the envelope book. And that's the thing I love most about any kind of creative thing, whether it be, music, movies, or writing.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And obviously I was saying, films and books, but obviously, music is really, I do think that musicians, composers that write just songs as opposed to using their own personal experiences, I mean, that work, it might be technically brilliant. It might have wonderful melodies, but it never resonates like, something, Nirvana or, why did I pick Nirvana? Tom Waits, whoever.
The Who.
These people that draw from themselves. That stuff always lasts and always is the stuff you go back to over and over again when you're trying to pull out a record to play,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Sam kind of just said it, but I've been reading Pete Townshend's autobiography, and, he's a guy that pulls so much from his own life. And it's kind of cool because reading his book and you go back to listen to like Tommy or Quadrophenia or something, and you hear it in a whole new light because you get these really personal things that he talks about. And for him, like he says, even in the book, kind of like you said, he doesn't know any other way to write. Like he has to write from a personal experience.
Well, I mean, talking about me, which is not, I'm not as comfortable doing this as you might think. I'm not a big look at me kind of guy,
Mm-hmm.
but it was actually a conversation I had many, many, many years ago. I had just written London's Dark, and it was going to be published, but it hadn't been published yet. And I was at a bar at I believe it was a Birmingham Comic Book Convention. Years ago, this is. And I was chatting with Grant Morrison, and he was further along than I was. He was just writing Arkham Asylum. So that's where we are. It was early on.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about like trying to put yourself, being honest, putting yourself in comics. And it was that conversation that really inspired me and really was why so much of me was in Starman. And I think made that book into what it was me trying to do that even then on a much, much less of a scale, but trying to put as much of me in as I could in terms of, my feelings of being disenfranchised from my mother, became Jack's father. Lots of different things were in that comic that was me trying to do something that really, I have to say it was Grant Morrison back in the day that got me thinking along those lines. So I guess you can thank him for both Flex Mentallo and in a way Airboy too.
We kind of thank Grant Morrison just like he's kind of almost like a deity figure. Like sometimes when we are worshiping at the porcelain altar, we say one to Grant. We thank Grant Morrison.
Yeah,
that's lovely. That's an image I will carry with me.
Yeah,
we try to always leave our guests with something colorful.
Yes.
But I mean, and this is something. I mean, and I'm sure you know this, but I just wanted to reiterate, and because again, I was so heartbroken, but in a great way by Airboy, that I hope on some level that. I mean, I love Starman as much as the next guy, but you have written great things after Starman. Like, for example, like the recent C-3PO special is one of the best things to come out of the new Star Wars comics.
Thank you. It's thank you very much. I don't know why, but I live in kind of a vacuum. I don't get a lot of praise. It's nice to hear it, but I don't hear that much of it. So I'm always like, I'm constantly questioning whether I have a place in comics anymore, or if I really did. I mean, it's interesting, and I think about this in terms of Starman a lot. Starman was written, like, as I was ending, it was really as the internet was just starting to come up. There was no Facebook. Was there Twitter? I don't even think there was Twitter. MySpace. There was MySpace.
Oh yeah.
So that sort of instant love of what you do, or hatred, or indifference, honestly, wasn't there for me. So I never really knew if people, I used to go to signings and I'd sit there twiddling my thumbs. I didn't have a line of people, screaming James Robinson Starman. So I really didn't know if I was doing any good. But the plus. But it always sold a certain amount. It always sold enough that it was never cancelled. And Archie Goodwin obviously believed in it. And then to be fair to Paul Levitz, who was the publisher, he also just made sure it was always published. As long as it didn't start to cost them money to do it, they were fine. So I question now, like, whether the internet, whether I could have done a comic, whether anybody could do a comic like that now, because you nowadays, with the internet, there's such a rush to prejudgment that people have already told you your book's crap before they've read it based on the solicitation. So I don't know where I'm going with this, except to say that, it's nice to hear you say this, and I'm sincere when I say that, but at times I'm wary of praise because I think I'm worried that it will affect my work.
I'm surprised you didn't get more buzz. I mean, I feel like the Star Wars crowds would be a little more, especially considering you're talking about C-3PO's red arm.
Oh yeah.
Well, I know. Tell me about it. But people. I mean, people. Obviously, yeah, I've signed quite a few of those since it was published. But people also just go, "Oh, hey, great book, thank you," and you're like, "Oh, okay, glad you liked it. Where are you from? Toledo? No, oh, that's a safe trip home, And that's really it. No one says, "Oh my God, I was ever since the movie, I was thinking the red arm, where, why?" And then you answered it, "Thank you." I never get that, which I'm kind of joking, but it's just an example of how what you might think is, as a creator, is the reception that one gets for one's work. Often that isn't the case.
Well, it's funny. 2 quick stories about that. One, my sister, who's 21 now, she has never really cared about Star Wars whatsoever, but she loves C-3PO. So the first comic book she's ever bought, ever, and only since, is a C-3PO comic. So thank you for writing that, for at least getting my sister to even read a comics. That's huge. And 2, I swear this is true, speaking of Starman, I was at the Baltimore Comic-Con, a couple of weeks ago now?
Yeah, it was the beginning of the month.
Yeah, and just real quick background. I used to work at a comic shop, and my dad, who's in his mid-60s, started getting the comics because I was working at a comic shop. He wanted to see what his son was getting into.
Became a born again,
and ever since the fan, word with Daredevil, that's his guy and everything. So anyway, my dad goes to these cons with me now, which is really funny because it feels like I'm taking my son to the comic cons, because
he happens to be in his mid-60s.
Yeah, he's in his mid-60s, but he is looking for all these issues and everything. Anyway, kind of inverse of that, they, at the cons, they do these things where they'll collect a complete run of a book in single issues and put it in a big kind of nice kind of package and sell it. So I'm walking around and my dad's looking for Daredevil stuff, and I always just like to see what's around there. And a father and a son walk up behind me, and probably younger than I'm 30, so the kid was probably a couple years younger than me. But the dad sees the complete Starman run, and he turns to his son and he goes, "Holy fucking shit!" He goes, "I cannot believe they have this." And his son's like, "What?" And he goes, "This is the greatest run in comic history." He goes, "I used to have all these, holy shit." And so he he kind of probably freaked his son out because he was going crazy. But he had this moment of recollection of Starman, and turned his son on to Starman at a Baltimore Comic-Con. And I always love seeing those moments at cons, whether it's a father and a son or a friend or something like that. So I thought you would get a kick out of hearing that story.
Absolutely. It's always lovely to hear stuff like that. So sometimes it's quite. I had one guy and he was trying to keep it in, but he got very, very emotional, telling me that the end of Starman had happened around about when his own father died, and how it had helped him through his father's passing. And he started to choke up, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to cry in front of this comic fan." So we had this contest, I think, without officially announcing it, of who could not cry. But either one of us could have gone at any minute. Yeah. So anyway, whatever I was saying with regards to that, it was fathers and sons. Mm-hmm. Fans. Yeah. I've kind of lost where we were.
No, yeah, I had told that story about that father who was introducing his son at the Baltimore Comic-Con. He saw the complete collection of Starman, and he freaked out, telling his kid.
Well, I mean, like I say, I just don't know nowadays if Starman could be done, only because the readership is different. People get bored. Also, I think because of the internet, to some degree, I think it acts like one of those soap opera digests that you see at the checkout in a supermarket, where you can follow the story and you don't have to actually watch the episode of General Hospital or whatever show it is. And I think sometimes the internet acts that way, where these guys, they discuss these storylines and they never actually read the comic, so they don't know any of the nuance or the skill. And it's just a very different place now than it was when I wrote Starman.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have the season format where, I mean, you've been writing for Marvel for a while now.
Getting on there, I mean, I will say that even though it was sort of like glossed over. No one really took much attention to it. I would put my run of Fantastic Four up there with anything I've done.
I was going to ask, how did it feel? I mean, you were tasked with closing out the Fantastic Four, the title that launched the Marvel Age. That had to be. I mean, now.
It was odd. That wasn't the plan when I started it. In fact, and please, obviously, I'm not offended. Did you guys actually even look at that comic, or you just kind of know about it?
I was working at the shop at the time, so I was reading. I probably read the first volume of it when I was working at the shop.
Okay, well, it got better after you left. Let me tell you that. But no, I mean, I didn't know. We didn't know going in that Secret Wars was going to happen. Mm. So when Valeria goes to stay with Doctor Doom, that was going to become. I didn't realize it, but I was going to do like the Age of Doom. Doom was going to take over the world with her help. That was going to be the arc that it was going to be like another 6 issues. I thought I was going to be doing about 24 issues. So that would have been the last 6 issues. And then when I found out, you can't do that. We've got this Secret Wars planned. I actually put in a moment where Doctor Doom was looking at all these different Earths as a sort of little nod to, okay, well then what she helped him do was set things up for Secret Wars. No one noticed that, but that was like the first Secret Wars teaser, I think, before anyone else did anything. But I mean, like I say, it felt weird ending it, but and also it felt weird for me that, again, it's like fans like rush to judgment when they don't have all the information, and sometimes they get really angry and really creative. I mean, in the very beginning, if you remember, I took away Johnny Storm's powers. And it was, you tear the team down, you create drama, and then you fix it or put it back together, and you hand the thing to the next writer. That's always how it should be. But in this instance, I wrote this long thing about how obviously what I was planning is the Fantastic Four would go to another world, and they'd meet an all-black version of the Fantastic Four, and they'd all die apart from Johnny Storm, and he'd come to this Earth and become the Black Johnny Storm, and how dare I change everything just to accommodate the Fantastic Four movie. And it was such an ornate, thought-through storyline, and I was like, and he was so angry at me. And I was like, this is all fiction. I haven't done any of this. And then, of course, people were like, well, you intend to kind of like mess up the Fantastic Four to send them off on their way when you end the book. You're going to do this terrible thing on Fantastic Four. And I was, if any of you saw the final issue, like my whole point at the end was just to give people a last great Fantastic Four run where they come together at the end and they're a family and they have their powers and they are the team that I grew up with. One of the first comic books I ever bought when I was a little boy was Fantastic Four 99, which was my first encounter with the Fantastic Four and also with the Inhumans. So I would never do anything to just fuck them up for the sake of a movie or just some weird reason outside of being a good storyteller.
I swear I'm not making these stories up, and I'm not just telling them the brown nosy here. But when I was working at the comic shop again, and this has to do with Fantastic Four, there was a gentleman who would come in. Every Wednesday, New Comic Book Day, he'd always have a different Marvel tie on, like a Spider-Man tie, X-Men tie, Fantastic Four tie. Anyway, he was probably in his mid-60s, maybe a little older. And
not your dad.
Not my dad, no. And he had every single issue of the Fantastic Four. He bought number 1 off the shelf, and he had every single issue of Fantastic Four. That was his favorite thing in the world. And he was one of those guys, I remember when the movie was coming out, too. Everyone, was like, oh, fuck this movie. And he's like, hey, I love the Fantastic Four. I'll see it. He was just very calm about it.
I mean, we saw it.
Yeah, I didn't see him after, I didn't see the follow-up of it, what he said. But anyway, just to tell.
Did he come in after it? You sure he didn't use one of those ties to hang himself?
Yeah. No, I didn't. Yeah, that's true. I hadn't seen him in a while. But no, but this is real. This is true. He came in, and I remember when your last issue came out, I talked to him about it afterwards, and he was so. Even though, of course he was sad that the Fantastic Four was ending, but he was so fucking happy that, like you were saying, he said it felt like an old Fantastic Four issue. So, like, you helped close out this guy who had been reading Fantastic Four since day one. You know, he picked it up just because the cover looked cool. You know, probably at a convenience store back in 1962, and so
he quietly went home, took 2 Alka-Seltzer, and died.
Yeah, no. But anyway, so just so you know, you made that fans
that's
very
fantastic.
happy.
That's wonderful. You do. It's nice that someone got it. I mean, I think at that point, honestly, everybody was just kind of like over Fantastic Four. I think Jonathan's storyline was. I mean, my intention really was that to do something that would appeal to like that old gentleman or old time readers. I think Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four, which is an incredible run. But as it goes on, I felt it felt less like Fantastic Four and more the adventures of like Nathan Richards and the kids growing up, and it was getting into all this sort of layers of generations and stuff with older versions of characters and whatnot. And I felt that whilst it was really great reading, it veered too much away from that intrinsic family that they were. And then with Matt Fraction, I think, and I know Matt very well, but I think he didn't. There was something not right with his run. The Mike Allred run with the alternate FF was much more successful, and I think both more people enjoyed it. They responded to it, but I think that his actual run, and I read it very carefully, and I think he did some great things, but it just wasn't quite what people wanted. So I wanted to do something that had those old roots, like not. I mean, I know they're a cosmic team; they go into space. But trying to do something that was like, I remember some of those issues where they were in New York or they were in America, and I just wanted to try and pull something like that off, but ultimately end it in the world that I can't remember what it's called now, where Annihilus lives. What's that called? The Negative Zone. To bringing in the Negative Zone, trying to bring in every character I could think of to the Fantastic Four, having that moment. Obviously I'm talking to you guys and I'm not upset by this, but I know you haven't read them all, but like trying to put those FF members would be in it for a minute, and the Inhumans and everybody I could possibly think of, I tried to cram into those 18 issues. In fact, it broke my heart. There is this big escape from prison they do, and the FF, the Fraction Mike Allred team helped them. And then at the end, they're finally whisked away by the Inhumans. And I made sure that all the Inhumans were in that double-page spread. And it was only like when it was coming out, it was too late. I was like, oh, no, I forgot Crystal. How could I forget Crystal? So there's no point to this story. I'm just telling you.
No, I love hearing you talk about. No, I love hearing you talk about. And I love the Inhumans, too. The Inhumans are the best.
Yeah,
they are the best, aren't they? Yes.
Black Bolt is just the coolest character in like comic history.
My only complaint, and I had to deal with this in Squadron Supreme, because I had images. I had Leonard Kirk doing images of Black Bolt from the issues of the Avengers that Jonathan Hickman did when he's in his original costume. And now they've done the whole thing with Captain America where they put Kevlar on his costume.
Yeah, he's got like kind of like an armor plated thing.
And it's just like, come on, guys. I mean, in terms of like perfect costumes, there's like Wally Wood, the Red Daredevil costume. I think the Legion of Superheroes Sunboy costume, the original one. Black Bolt. Mm-hmm. Hal Jordan Green Lantern. There are a few costumes that are just perfect.
I'll throw in my favorite. I think you might just be like, fuck off. But my favorite costume of all time is the original Captain Britain costume, where he's got like the blonde hair at the top of the...
With the weird face.
With the face and the lion stuff.
I'm very partial to that costume.
Oh, good.
And
it's the best.
It was... Because I grew up... Like, you didn't experience this, but I grew up with... That was a weekly comic. When Captain Britain came out, and it was a weekly comic, and you got a mask, and, Herb Trim doing a British superhero. It's kind of mind-blowing. And then when you see it, like the next time you saw Captain Britain as a British comic fan was in Marvel Team Up, when it was drawn by John Byrne, which was just like, dear God, could it get any better? But it was that costume. I agree. Great costume.
It's the best. Love it.
Before they gave him the standard.
Well, the other one's fine, too, where he's got like the massive boots.
And the massive, chest.
Yeah. The Union Jack. Yeah. Well, Union Jack's just a great character, too. We're talking about British comics.
I would love to do... Had Invaders kept going, I would do more with the Union Jack. I love Union Jack. I even, at one point, pitched, back in the day, when when Epic was around with Archie Goodwin and they were doing like painted books and stuff like that. I pitched a Union Jack graphic novel that was set during World War One.
Oh God!
And it was like at times it was like Lawrence Arabia, and at times it was like H.P. Lovecraft, and
Jesus.
he was dealing with like the Prussians had elder gods and everything else. And then ultimately, at the very, very end of it, no one really 100% knows the reason why America entered World War One. There's lots of, obviously, history. There's, no one can really put their finger on the thing. It wasn't like Pearl Harbor where they got invaded.
Yeah.
So one of the things that possibly happened is that a British agent sent a telegram from Mexico saying that the Prussians were training Pancho Villa's army to invade America from the south.
Like the Zimmerman telegram.
What's that?
The Zimmerman telegram. It was a telegram from the German consulate to Mexico, promising Mexico lost territories from America if they would have invaded Woodrow Wilson's.
So that that telegram being subverted and getting into the American hands from Mexico. After he takes the rifle shot that kills the villain, like the villain gets away, and then you cut to Mexico at the end, and Union Jack's there, and he takes this shot and kills the villain, and then he sends the telegram as the second part of his mission, and brings America into the war. So that was a plan for me and Union Jack many years ago that unfortunately never happened, but it would have been cool, right?
Oh, I will spend the rest of my life and give you all the money I ever make to make that happen. Yeah. There needs to be. Union Jack's one of those guys. Like I like, for lack of a better phrase, like D-list characters, and like even though I love Union Jack, he's like not around in anything really, and so I'm always like scrounging,
none of the Panini Press guys.
Yeah, just to see Union Jack show up in anything. You had me at Lawrence of Arabia, Union Jack.
At the moment I'm trying to find new things to do, so maybe I'll try and pitch. I've thought about this too, like a Union Jack story that had elements that were set during World War One that had ramifications in the present day. So you jump back and forth between two Union Jacks at different points in time, one of whom was a Lord Falsworth, and the other one is Joey Chapman, the ex-wrestler from Manchester. You couldn't get two more different people.
It's great.
So that would be a cool series, actually, wouldn't it? Jumping back and forth. Not jumping back and forth in time, but,
it'd be Godfather Part 2.
You've got a guaranteed 3-person distribution for that one, right?
That's
there.
right.
There we go. Yeah, I actually think it would be quicker to have the artist just draw it 3 times. It would be cheaper, and just hand them to you personally.
I'll take that.
Yeah, we're fine with that.
Yeah.
3 of a kind, or I guess technically 1 of a kind because they're all done individually.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have to imagine, to take it back to Fantastic Four, that before the first issue even hit the stands, you probably got some of the dumbest shit just over the fact that they were like red instead of blue. Yes.
And that was, I kind of expected it, and we even knew that it was somewhat like the Incredibles, but it was like, you cannot get more not Fantastic. Actually, that's not true. Johnny Storm had the red costume for that period when Medusa had the purple outfit. You know, that version of the Fantastic Four? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Was that like late 80s?
No, this was, well, you're not far off. It was like in the late 70s. And Sue Storm had gone off to take care of Franklin. And they needed, so Medusa joined. And she had like a cool, basically the purple costume that she kind of had during the Mike Allred run. And then Johnny wanted to shake things up, so he got a red costume, which he said was sort of a tribute to Jim Hammond as well. So there has been a red Fantastic Four costume before that. But anyway, this was the first one, and we tried different costumes, and, anything that was even remotely blue didn't feel shocking enough. You put black and green, and you've got a Green Lantern costume. Yellow and black look weird. So red and black, it just became that. And, obviously, we got so much shit about it. But it was always intended, that we were going to go back to blue. That was always the intention.
I would also be remiss. We're kind of just jumping all over, but what the hell? It's a conversation.
Yes, that's right.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I think that's one of the... Because a lot of the... Outside of the Joker... and maybe Bane, there aren't a lot of definitive ex-Batman villain stories. I thought Face to Face was like the definitive Two-Face story. I just kind of, I did want to kind of pick your brain a bit about that, and if you wanted to talk about that at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was written at an odd time for me because I had written Starman. I took a break from comics. I wasn't sure, and I wasn't like there's another creator who I won't name by name, but he decided at one point, this is years ago, he did this big long thing in the Comics Journal about he was leaving comics forever and goodbye comics and I'm done with comics and blah blah blah. And of course, he's back doing comic books. So you should always be careful what you say when you decide to turn your back on something, because you might end up coming back begging for forgiveness, you know? So I had never... Are you still there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I wasn't dumb like that, but I left and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do and if I'd said everything I needed to say in comics with Starman. And then Peter Tomasi, who had taken over editing Starman after Archie Goodwin, contacted me about it. And I had already had a little bit of a bad experience. I mean, I had a sour taste in my mouth a little bit about DC in that when I was sort of kicking around what I should do next, I was talking to Ed Brubaker, who at the time was writing Detective Comics. And I had this idea, and I pitched it to Ed, and it was that I would do, because I love Ralph Dibny, the Elongated Man. Mm-hmm. So I would do a Elongated Man backup, just like in the 70s when he would be in the back of Detective Comics. But then, much like Manhunter, it'd be written with Ed Brubaker, like with the plan that we would then do. The final part would be a full length Batman and Elongated Man mystery that would tie everything together. Mm-hmm. So we were all very excited, me and him, or we all were, me and him were, and we went running over to Dan DiDio at DC. And we're like, this is what I want to do. And he's like, oh, well, we're killing off Sue Dibney, so you can't do that. And I was like, oh, really? You're killing off Sue Dibney? That seems so mean. So I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then Tomasi came along and said, hey, do you want to do this Batman story? And it was, it was a challenge. And I've always loved Two-Face because if you remember, like you say, he's one of the great Batman villains. Well, originally he only appeared in three 10-page stories in Detective Comics. You remember that, right?
I do now.
Like during the Golden Age, he appeared in three parts, and then he was cured at the end. He was handsome Harvey Dent, and he went off to have a happy life. And it was only in the 70s, so what, 30 years later, that Denny O'Neil was like, oh, there's this cool character. Why the fuck have we not used him since the 1940s? Mm-hmm. So he always fascinated me that he was this finite story that then sort of came to life and really is, after the Joker, he's probably my favorite Batman. I think probably everybody's favorite Batman villain after the Joker. So that interested me. And then doing that issue in the hotel room where he's talking about doing drugs and stuff, and I'm listing all the drugs he's done. And I'm thinking like, wow, could I do that now? I mean, it seems like people are more scared to do that stuff, even a few years later. But so I was very proud of it, and it was the first time I worked with Leonard Kirk, who, obviously I went on to do Fantastic Four and Squadron Supreme with. Well, yeah. So thank you. I mean, I'm very happy with it. I felt very good when they collected the best Two-Face stories of all time, and that one issue of him in the hotel room talking about drugs made it into the book.
Well, it was very intriguing because it always, especially with the animated series and all that, it had always been portrayed more so as like bipolarity or multiple personality disorder. But you in Face to Face had kind of depicted the dual personality thing as an addiction for Harvey, and I thought that was a very fascinating kind of approach for the character that we hadn't seen before. Well,
I think yes, and I think I myself, as you probably know from Airboy, wrestle with my demons constantly. So I think maybe I was, again, we talk about putting ourselves in comics. I think maybe I was putting myself in comics even there. Yeah. So I'm glad you liked it. I mean I've certainly signed a few issues, but I always think I'm just signing those issues of someone's Batman collection that I happen to have written. So it's nice to have someone actually say some relevant points to the actual story that they like. So thank you very much.
Yeah. No problem at all. Thanks for writing them. I mean, it's quite. I mean, you've hit all the. I feel like you've hit all the big things. You know, you've written Superman with the Coming of Atlas, and in through New Krypton. You've written Batman with Face to Face.
Well, Superman would have been better. I'll say this now: if me and Greg Rucka had been left alone, that would have been a much better series. But it was what it was, and I'm very proud of the Monel stuff, especially. I think that had that been originally, that was going to be Adventure Comics. Was going to be the original idea was it was going to be that back in the day was that Jeff Johns and I were going to write and Mark Waid. The original plan was that Mark Waid was going to write World of New Krypton, but that would be the Superman. That would be the Superman comic. Would be Mark Waid doing Jor-El, oh not Jor-El, Kal-El on New Krypton. They were going to relaunch Adventure Comics, and I was going to do Mon-El in that, and then Jeff was going to do Superboy in action, and they were going to be kind of like the idea was that they would be rivals for who would take over for Superman in Metropolis in terms of the public's eye and indeed in Kal-El's eye, and ultimately they would kind of like become brothers, and by the end of it, as Mon-El was being helped towards the Phantom Zone so he could stay alive. You know, it would be this heartbreaking thing for Superboy. So that was the original idea. And then it just sort of got fucked up by
New Krypton.
Too many cooks.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. But yes, so I've done Superman, Batman,
Justice League.
Justice League, thank you, with the B team. Never got any of the A team, but I think I was able to make it my own book. For again, it had I try and make lemonade out of lemons.
You had Kongorilla.
I think I did a pretty good job,
I feel like I didn't know what, Congo Bill was a thing until I read, Cry for Justice. And then I was like, oh, there's this whole, golden ape man that runs around the DC universe.
Well, the thing is, though, I worked out, there's this whole, the life story of Congo Bill. I have it from his days, this is almost by way of nothing, but if you look at the history of sniping, like snipers, the first snipers were Scottish gamekeepers in the First World War who brought this, they were picking off poachers by sitting in the trees and whatnot. So they brought all that to World War One, including those camo suits with all the fur and the brush and bush and stuff. So he was a Scottish gamekeeper who then became a sniper and became a hunter. And his voice, this giant ape, his voice, he had Sean Connery's accent. That was always, I would tell people that. So I'm glad. I mean, and he was in the first issue of. He was in Action Comics #1 along with Superman.
Nice.
So he's one of the oldest DC superheroes.
Speaking of Sean Connery and brown nosing you, I will say I know it gets a lot of flack, but I'm actually a huge fan of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie. Is there anything that you want to talk about with that, or we can glaze over it and just go on to the next topic?
No, I mean I'm not ashamed of anything I've done. I mean, some of the things are unfortunate. What happened? So what happened with that was I wrote. They wanted to do. So Don Murphy, producer, got the rights from Alan Moore to do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and they brought me in and they wanted me to do it. Now at the time, there was only that first arc. Those first 6 issues were all that was being published. Mm-hmm. So, and if you look at the actual comic, it takes 4 issues to recruit the League, and then they deal with, Moriarty and Fu Manchu quickly, and that's it. Mm-hmm. When you write a film, if you're recruiting characters and setting everything up, that's your first third of a film. That's kind of the golden rule. Yeah. So I basically had recruiting them as the first third. What do I do with the rest of the movie? I can't use Fu Manchu because it's racially inappropriate in today's world, so he's out. Mm-hmm. And they wanted a laser beam, the device, the thing that you're trying to stop, to be something that made sense in the past but had resonance in the present. Right. So I wrote this original script. Oh, and they wanted a young action star.
Of course.
in it.
Tom
Of course,
Sawyer,
but it's,
yeah.
and I told them at the time, I said, look, obviously I want to write this. I want to, write a screenplay. But really, this should be done by the BBC as a 6-part drama with Doctor Who level effects, but with great British actors doing all the roles.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, maybe, but we want a summer movie. So my first thing was Tom Sawyer. And what some people don't know is that there isn't just one Tom Sawyer book. There's 4 or 5 books that Mark Twain wrote, including Tom Sawyer, Boy Detective. And even though they're written, many years after, one is many years after the other, they never age. He's always young Tom Sawyer. So I was like, well, I guess Mark Twain is treating him much like, Spider-Man or any of these characters that don't age. So I'll make him, a bit older and give him this backstory that he ends up in the Secret Service. So, and then I set the whole thing in New York, and the MacGuffin, the laser beam. I found out that the first use of the first real use of German warfare was the American Civil War, and then between the Civil War, obviously, the League is set between the Civil War and World War One. But I thought, but at the time in Burbank, where I lived, there had been that woman that had the flesh-eating bacteria that they actually ended up putting in an episode of X-Files because it happened in real life. Yeah. So I just kind of put all that together with mustard gas and all the stuff that happened in World War One and created this sort of flesh-eating gas, and that became the thing they had to stop in New York and everything else. And Sean Connery read it and loved it. But then, and so it was a movie. It's going to happen. Once that big thing, a director that can actually get the movie made, or sometimes a producer, but it tends to be an actor. When he says, I'm going to do it, then it's happening. Right. So it's happening, and then 9/11 happened. And the studio said, well, we want to make this movie, but we can't do this script because we can't spend all this money, and then just as it's coming out, and bear in mind when 9/11 happened, I mean, really, the terrorists did very little after that. But we didn't know, we being the collective world, didn't know if the next attack was going to happen next week, if there was a whole series of these attacks, if there were going to be planes flying into every building over the next year. You never knew what was going to happen. And there had been the Saran gas attack in Japan. So it wasn't like, if you remember, that happened in the 90s. So it wasn't like it was unheard of that something like that wouldn't happen. So they changed the whole story. And I was still writing it, but I was really writing by committee. By this point, everybody, the director, the producers, everybody was throwing ideas. So as a result, it's not the movie that I originally wrote. I'm very glad you like it, and I'm proud of the bits of it that I'm proud of. But there's another version. In fact, I will tell you this now. Do I have your email? I do. I have someone's email. Sam, I have your email, don't I?
Yes, sir.
So I will send you the original movie, the screenplay.
I think we all now have figurative and literal erections over that.
So, but if you like it, you have to A, let me know, and also B, tell everybody that it's a cool screenplay. Okay,
for sure.
Yes, sir.
Deal.
So I will do that when we stop talking, because I know if I don't do it now, I'll forget, and then I'll look like a cunt. So that's it. I mean, I'd love to talk a little bit about Scarlet Witch.
Oh, sure, yeah. I was what I was gonna do with tracing your, hitting all the major comic milestones. I was going to ask, you're doing Scarlet Witch now. You've just, Namor is pushing up Undersea Daisies. I was going to ask what major you wrote Spider-Man with Mark Waid. I was going to ask what outside of maybe Union Jack and Flanders Fields that you wanted to maybe tackle next. But yeah, we can absolutely talk Scarlet Witch.
Well, the problem is that with that, what I'd like to tackle next, there are a couple of things in the offing who are characters that I really want to do that I'm developing now with Marvel, but I can't tell you. So yeah, I know, isn't it frustrating? I want to just tell you, but I can't. So you just have to, in terms of what I would like to do next. Oh, I will tell you one thing. One of the characters I would love to do, I have a really great idea for Black Knight.
Ooh.
But because they just had that series and it wasn't so successful, I don't know that I would get a chance to do that anytime soon. So I can tell you that because that's more speculative.
Well, that'd be cool.
But one of my other favorite characters, I'm trying to do a version of him that is unlike anything you would expect. And then, I mean, I can't say anymore. There's a couple of really good characters that I've wanted to do, and hopefully you'll be hearing news about them soon.
Sweet.
But then with Scarlet Witch, I mean, that was my idea. In that I was talking, we were talking about like having a guest star in Fantastic Four, which she does. And I was thinking about it. I was like, why hasn't there been a good Scarlet Witch comic? And she's going to be appearing in, at the time, Age of Ultron hadn't come out, the Avengers movie. But I was like, why hasn't she had her own comic? And then I started to think more about her, and I realized, and I was like, you can't really describe her personality. And people, when I point this out, people tend to agree. Like, I could ask you now, what is the personality of Tony Stark, or Thor, or even a weird character like now I'm forgetting, like one of the Alpha Flight, like Sasquatch from Alpha Flight. But
yeah.
but like, what is Scarlet Witch? And you would say, well, she was the wife of the Vision. She was the brother of Petro. Her whole personality is her backstory and her associations. But she really didn't have any kind of I don't feel much of a personality of her own. So I wanted to kind of give her that, and also introduce her to new readers and hopefully female readers. And when I've had, I mean, now things are changing. Like my wife reads Image books, and she not because of me. She was reading comics when I met her, but like when I was dating girls. And they'd ask me what I did, and I would say, "Oh, I write comics." So they say, "Oh, I love comics." They'd all say this: "I like Betty and Veronica," and I would be like, "Oh, great!" But then it occurred to me as I was talking to them that like they didn't care about backstory, and if they bought issue 590 and they missed 2 issues because Arctic Monkeys were playing and they wanted to follow the band or something, they could pick up 2 issues later and they'd get another good story. So I wanted to do a comic book where, yes, there's a B plot, but each issue can be read on its own, picked up and enjoyed. And once I pitched all of that to Marvel, they got behind it. Then the idea came into shape that we would try and do a different artist every issue. And I'd had that training from Starman with Times Past, where I would write these stories, these fill-in issues, specifically to try and suit the style of the artist. And So really, that's what I was trying to do with Scarlet Witch: is give her a personality, give her make her more of a character you cared about for who she was and not what she was or the things she did, and then have fun with different artists. And nowadays, thankfully, there's more and more female creators in the industry. So I'm a male writer, but I tried to we had female editors. Or Emily Shaw was my editor. She's just left, but there's Christina Harrington is now editing it. And then we tried to put as many female artists as we could in the book, and I think it's been pretty well received, for what it is, which is one of those fringe Marvel books that was only ever intended to be 12 issues, and we're keeping it going for more than that. So that's, I think, a pretty successful thing.
Was the idea to have her kind of go on this international, globe-trotting adventure? Kind of an idea to explore who Wanda was in these different, juxtaposed against these different settings?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was I don't know that when I started it, I necessarily thought it was going to be globe-trotting, which it has been. But it just sort of came that way as an artist I would find out was available and interested. And they had, like, Kei Zawa, who did issue 10, which is that the latest issue out? I think it is, the one in Japan, which I'm actually very proud of. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it, but it's sort of like a horror manga. And it's beautifully drawn, but that really came out of the idea of working with a Japanese artist who lived in Japan, and her being able to bring that level of familiarity to the source, to the locale and everything else. That sort of became a thing that I ran with, and that's why there's the issue in Spain with Javier Pulido and various issues like that. That was me trying to use the artists for and who they were, and it did become this It has become this globe-trotting book, but so I guess it was always sort of the intention, but it's definitely been more so than perhaps I originally intended. I think I probably originally intended a little bit more of it to be set in America than it has been.
Would you kind of, I mean, you kind of alluded that you're extending beyond 12. Would that globe-trotting aspect continue as well?
Yes.
Well, it's good. That's good.
And then Squadron Supreme was originally, I mean, just by way of nothing, because you mentioned Namor. By the way, my wife loves Namor. Just fucking loves him. So she is. So what? So when I was like, we've got to show these guys that they're like badasses. You know, they'll do anything. Why don't we? And I thought, why don't we kill Namor? I had this whole plan: kill Namor, behead him, so that it isn't one of these things where he's probably alive. You know, we didn't get to see the body. I mean, he is fucking dead. He's beheaded, and then Dr. Spectrum kicks his head. But I always had a way out. I knew how I was going to bring him back, and I was told by the powers that be at Marvel, well, you can kill him, but you can't stay dead for long. You've got to bring him back pretty quickly. But then it was interesting how even when you have a plan, originally I was going to bring him back with issue 6, but things come up, other storylines, bits of crossovers, Weird World, those 2 issues in Weird World. What's the crossover I did with everybody? Civil War. You know, all of these things push things back just a little bit, so that the arc I'm doing now, Finding Namor, which had a prequel in 9 and is going through to issue 14. I mean, it took me a lot longer to get to than I actually intended. So people that hate me for killing Namor, I'm sorry, I plan to resurrect him far sooner. And whenever I bring up Namor being dead and my wife hears me, she gives me the finger. It's quite lovely.
That's funny.
That's love, man.
Yeah, it certainly is.
What is it about the Golden Age characters between the Invaders and the JSA that really kind of appeals to you?
Well, I think it was when I grew up, and I was sort of very lucky that although I'm born in England, I spent about 5 years of my childhood in Australia. And in Australia, they would get American comic books somewhat later, but they would also get they also had the rights to do these. They were just gigantic, big black and white collections. They would literally just do black and white collections of like 5 or 6 comics in one big black and white book. And when you're a kid, you know, color's nice, but stories are where you're at when you're a kid, you know. So I just devoured these things. So through it, I sort of discovered Earth 2, and when you're a kid, things that really aren't that important, you obsess over. Like, how is there a Green Lantern where there's so little green in his costume? I remember thinking that, and it really bothered me for an uncomfortably long amount of time. You know, when I was in my teenagers, I was still bothered by that. And a character like the original Starman, who has this amazing green and red costume, and yet he isn't on our Earth. I had to make sense of Earth 2 and the Golden Age and all of this stuff. So nowadays, with the internet, or even with just the comic fandom, it's so much easier to learn about any aspect of comics. I mean, like, you think about, like, what's the War of Kings, the Realm of Kings, and all that stuff. With the Guardians of the Galaxy and all of the space books, Nova and all of that, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine if you were a kid just being dropped into that. It would be completely bewildering. Nowadays, you can find out everything you need to know. So back then, I began to collect Earth 2 appearances, and the Justice Society would appear in the JLA once a year, and I would look forward to that and all of that. So and that sort of, and then obviously, the 100-page, you're 30. This is way before your time, but there used to be these 100-page DC books that would have all these amazing Golden Age reprints, and slowly putting together who these characters were and what. And also, finding out that the quality characters, the Freedom Fighters, were actually a whole different comic book company that DC had bought, and the Fawcett characters. Putting all this shit together was like a fantastic puzzle to do when you're a young, comic, 12, 13, 14-year-old comic book fan. And then at the same time, over the Invaders, really what got me into the Invaders and Marvel's Golden Age, which was far less reprinted. There was far less of it around. But Roy Thomas, if I had to choose between the All-Star Squadron or the Invaders, for me, in terms of Roy Thomas doing Golden Age characters, it would be the Invaders, because with the All-Star Squadron, he tried to make every Golden Age story work in continuity. And most of those stories were written on the fly by people that hadn't even read the issues done before. There was no logic between one story and the next from a lot of these characters. So trying to make sense of it, there was a Comics Cavalcade #1, which has Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman running a race and going through the tape like they're at an athletic meeting. Well, obviously it's just a stupid cover, right? But he had to put in explaining why they were at an athletic meet, running on a track and racing each other, and all this kind of like really myopically detailed thing that I think got in the way of telling really good stories. With the Invaders, he made it clear early on that the Golden Age Marvel comics were published by someone in the 1940s as fictionalized versions of what was actually happening in the Golden Age Marvel War. I hope that makes sense, me verbally explaining it. It's a little bit tricky. But what that did was it gave him leeway to tell stories. The story came first, not 40-year-old continuity. And then you had, Frank Robbins is not a favorite artist of everybody. He can be a little bit off-putting because he's so very much of his time. But him, what was he, inked by Frank Springer? That artwork was so suited that book, like the introduction of Union Jack and Spitfire and the Mighty Destroyer and all that stuff they put in. It was just so well done that kind of really got me interested in Marvel's Golden Age. A little bit later than DC, but once you're into it, there's a lot of interesting stuff.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I was wondering because obviously you helped co-write the return of the JSA into the DCU, and of course you did the all new Invaders. So,
well, it's funny. Like, it's interesting. Every time I've tried to do stuff, I've met resistance from DC. At the time, they had killed off all of the Justice Society.
Yeah, during Zero Hour,
and they did not want a Justice Society book. They said it's old men and we don't want it and it's the past and we want to go forward and be in the future. And I was like, please let me do this. Please, I know I can do it right. And myself and David Goyer wrote Return of the JSA, and then I did the first 5 issues of the JSA book with him, and I handed it over to Jeff Johns. But like, I'll be honest. I mean, that was me. Like, I was responsible for convincing Mike Carlin, and admittedly, he was pretty open-minded, but it wasn't like, oh, you want to do it? Okay, let's do it. It took a little bit of convincing. And then when I was doing Earth 2, which was a fucking nightmare. But people were expecting me at some point to create a new Justice Society. And I was told by the powers that be up there that society is an old word. The new 52 is about young, sexy stuff. It's sexy. That was a word they like to use. It's sexy, sexy books, sexy heroes, And I said, well, what's that got to do with the Justice Society? Society is an old word. It's not a modern new word. It makes you think of old stuff. Society will never be a word that we use. And I was like, oh, so there'll be no Justice Society, no Justice Society. And now, of course, there's a book that's got society big and bold on its cover, I believe, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there was a lot of pushback from readers too. I mean, now with Rebirth, but yeah the idea of like sexy Superman that needs to wear armor, and yeah. Because if there's any hero that needs to wear armor, it's totally Superman.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this is mainly, I think, it's mainly down to Jeff Johns, but like, it's just taking it back to what it should have been the whole time. It's what people wanted. I remember trying to pitch them an idea that I'd have, Ted Cord as kind of like the brains helping a young, what's his name, Jaime Reese.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, no Ted Cord. Well, of course, that's what they're doing now. So, eventually people come around. But Justice Society, that really was me just like pushing for it. And I was the one that got it through. So for everyone that loves the Justice Society, you're welcome.
I mean, we do. We don't think it's old. Yeah.
No. Wildcat's like one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. I mean, what's it? They've got their own kind of, Starman, albeit it's Thom Kalor and not McCall. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
But James, something we ask everybody that comes on the show:
Go on.
what are you currently geeking out over?
Well, what am I geeking out over? Let me think. Well, it's not like I'm Mr. Cool that has some weird, jazz flutist from Reykjavik that's just blowing my mind. I just like what everyone else likes. So, like Stranger Things.
Yeah.
That's a popular one. Yeah.
Popular one. It's been out a while, but I mean, because of scheduling, it's my own opportunity. Me and my wife actually flew to Philadelphia to see them. The new Arctic Monkeys album. Not new Arctic Monkeys, I'm sorry. The new Last Shadow Puppets album. Which is, do you know who they are?
I don't. I know who the Arctic Monkeys are, but I've never heard of Lost Shadow Puppets.
The Last Shadow Puppets are a side band by Alex. What's his name? Not Alex Winter.
Is it
Alex Garner, the lead guy from the Arctic Monkeys.
Yeah.
And a guy called Miles Kane, and it sounds somewhat like Arctic Monkeys a little bit, but there's also like more orchestration. Feels like John Barry or like 1960s spy music.
Cool.
And they did an album like 7 years ago that was fantastic, and they reformed recently, and they did another album equally fantastic. And I saw them live when they played the first time, so we flew to Philly to see them this time, and so I'm geeking out over that. What else?
If you like the Arctic Monkeys, have you listened to the Japan Droids at all? They're about to go on tour again.
I've never heard of the Japan Droids.
It's a guitarist and a drummer. They're from Vancouver, and if you like kind of like electric guitar driven, kind of almost a punk feel to it, but there's still a more of a melody than say a lot of it. It's great. Listen to their album Celebration Rock. It's on Spotify. You can
I absolutely will. I take people's recommendations very seriously, and I always check them out. The Japan Droids, got it.
One word, yeah. It's a portmanteau. But yeah,
and then what else? This is so boring of me that I'm not. I'm still loving the Matthew Corbett books by Robert McCammon, which are mysteries set in colonial America around the 1700s, but they're like creepy and really cool.
Kind of like Solomon Kane.
Well, Solomon Kane's a Puritan that kills monsters and stuff. This is a young guy that's basically a detective before there were detectives, trying to like solve crimes when there's still people still being tried for being witches, and he's trying to apply science and stuff. But they're like beautifully, beautifully written, and they are just the descriptions. It's just they're so well done. Oh, the other thing I'm geeking out over is I don't know why, but I've kind of rediscovered the Hernandez brothers lately. I mean, I loved Love and Rockets, but I've been rereading their last series of Love and Rockets from start to finish, and they are so in control of their medium. Those guys, they're such geniuses that they're as good now as they always were. And we forget they've been around for 30-something years. I was like, I bet you the first issue of Love and Rockets came out before you were born. There you go.
Decent chance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
so that I'm geeking out over. Still listening to, what else? Just stuff. I mean, I buy lots of vinyl. Just bought a Cthulhu tiki mug.
Nice.
That's a first.
Like anybody, just the stuff. What else am I reading at the moment that... I don't know, just stuff like.
Do you have any favorite films so far this year?
I do. What have we watched that we like? Oh, Hateful Eight, like everybody, we like that.
Oh yeah. The whole
but
road
we
show.
saw it. You saw it at the cinema, projected in 70 mil.
Oh, you got to see the Roadshow version?
The Roadshow version. They have the book that comes out. They used to. It was fantastic.
It was lovely. We had a theater over here. We had to go all the way up into Maryland to do it, but I was able to see it when they had it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely that work. No matter what trouble you went to, once you were watching it, you were like, this is absolutely worth all the effort, right?
Totally agreed.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sorry. I wish there were more. Yeah, these things always happen. People say, "What are you reading? What are you liking?" And I know there's things I'm just not thinking of, and I'll be thinking about this all night. And I remember, like at 2 a.m, I'm
Wake
going to
up in a
sit up
cold
in bed and go,
sweat.
I love this or that. You know?
Just email Sam and we'll tack it on in the end when we record the episode.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, we'll read it off.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will.
I will give you. You were talking about recommendations. One of the movies that we love here that we've been geeking out about, I guess, for lack of a better word, for our own show, but is a movie called Sing Street. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
It was a
Sorry,
Irish film.
what? One more time. What was it called?
It's called Sing Street.
Sing Street.
Yeah, it takes place mid to late 80s,
1985 Dublin.
Yeah, in Dublin, and it deals with this kid discovering kind of himself and music from his older brother's vinyl collection, and he kind of finds his voice, and it's just this wonderful, beautiful indie rock type movie.
Nice. I'll check that out. That sounds great.
It's it touches on all the great kind of bands, and discovering looking at MTV and seeing Duran Duran for the first time,
Hall and Oates.
and it all stems from a girl. He sees a pretty girl and on the spot tells her he's in a band and then has to rush and create this band. But it's one of those things that just
It's a feel good movie.
it's so good. Yeah, it's one of those great life affirming movies.
Nice. I just reminded, by the way, the Get Down on Netflix.
Yeah, I need to check that out.
That is that last like rap battle or whatever in the streets of the Bronx. Oh god.
I thought, that was brilliant. But for me, the moment where my jaw dropped is when the producer, who's just wired out of his gourd on coke, and he knows that if he doesn't come through now, he's just fucked forever, and he basically, out of nothing, creates that whole church, production.
Yeah.
And you cut into him playing it, and you cut into it happening, and all of that. That was so good, and you can see like Baz Luhrmann all over that. Even though he didn't write all of them or direct all of them, it just feels like Baz Luhrmann. So that's something I was geeking out about. That was a great series.
Yeah, I feel like that got lost in the Stranger Things shuffle because it came out like a week or so after.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think also, although it was much better, I think vinyl on HBO hurt it. Although I didn't mind vinyl, but there was something soulless about it to me. And I think it came out too soon after vinyl as well. I think people kind of like dismissed it for the same for reasons that were unfair, I think.
Vinyl, I think, because I've watched all of Vinyl, I guess, in its only season.
Yeah,
that was a show that I feel like didn't quite know where it wanted to go, or had a bunch of filler episodes.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And like I say, there was something not quite. I didn't, even though I wanted to care about the characters. I mean, I cared more about the junkie punk guy.
Mick Jagger's son, yeah.
Yeah, the girl. I cared about some of those characters, but like the main characters, I just kind of like, I didn't care. Whereas at the Get Down, or the Get Down or the Get Back? The Get Down.
Get Down.
The Get Down. You kind of care about all of them. They all have their moment when you just love this character or that character.
Oh yeah, Shaolin Fantastic and the rest of the crew, totally.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So that is it, and I will think of some more things I'm geeking out over. I can't think for the moment.
That's quite all right. Now, James, is there anything? We've taken up like, this has been like one of seriously, and I hope this has been fun for you too. This has been one of the most fun, kind of personal, informative interviews we've had.
This is great. I tell you what, I've enjoyed it so much that when the issues come out of these new things I can't talk about, why don't I come back on and I can talk about them?
Absolutely, we love it.
Yeah. You got the email. Yeah.
So anyway, so I'll send you League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the original script.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we really didn't talk that much about it, but just to end, like, please, if you like cool indie books, independent comics, try the Saviors Collection. And I should also point out that, like, Jay Bone, the style he chose for that series with this, which was true to his own style, but also had a sort of a more shadowy, animated aspect that he chose for that series. I think it's some really, really gorgeous artwork, and which I think deserves a wider audience than it got the first time around. So anybody listening to this wants to, take a gamble on a really cool series, check out The Saviors. I would appreciate that.
And plus, he gets to draw like Day of the Dead, and that's like the coolest thing in the world.
Oh yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he absolutely did, and I gave him some pretty tough stuff to draw, and he just rose to the occasion every time. I really enjoyed it.
But yeah.
So, all right, guys. Well, I'm going to grab some food.
Excellent.
And very nice talking to you guys.
Yeah,
thanks
nice
so
talking
much.
to you too. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
That was a great interview.
So good.
I hope you guys at home, enjoyed it. For posterity's sake, James did in fact send us the original script for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I'm about an act into it, and I'm liking it so far.
It's pretty sweet. I mean, my complaints, and I think Chris, you'll as the biggest League fan here, the problem with that film is certainly not in the writing.
Yeah, no, it's it suffers from, like he said in the interview, too many cooks in the kitchen, and like that's pretty apparent. Even for someone that praises it like I do for how fun it is. But yeah, it's. But I'm kind of sad that this version that we're reading, for a couple reasons, didn't make it to the screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also apologize for not reading all of his Fantastic Four run.
You can always make that right, Jake.
I will. Well, it's funny, at the comic shop, I was like, I am going to just sit and read all of these. It wasn't for lack of trying.
There's just a lot of them out there.
Yeah,
before he started writing the title, or no, when he started writing the title, you had never read a Fantastic Four book.
I hadn't, and I was kind of testing all different kinds of stuff. And also, I was working at the comic shop at the time, so I had a lot of access to things to read, very easily. But anyway, that interview was great. I mean, we got to talk about freaking Union Jack and Captain Britain, and
how long have you been waiting to talk about those characters?
I don't think I ever have. Yeah, I mean, I was like the one time it would have been totally perfect to talk about Dread, because at the time, I guess. This is coming out Wednesday, so the last Wednesday was the 2000th issue, or Prague of 2000 AD.
Yeah,
which is pretty spectacular and wonderful.
Which has got some of the people we've had on the show.
Yeah, back in it and rocking and rolling. But the fact that we got to just step aside for a bit and talk about the wonderful Captain Britain and Union Jack and his treatment and idea for Union Jack. Oh my God.
Flanders Fields, baby.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, yeah, like Lawrence of Arabia. I was like, God. Union Jack, God. And then I was so glad when I was like,
Mr. Potter is not minding that it hurts.
Is when we were talking about greatest costumes, and I was like, you may just think this is the dumbest thing in the world, but then I realized I was like talking to an Englishman, and I was like, the original Captain
Britain writes comic books.
Yeah, and I was like, the original Captain. Yeah, seriously, the original Captain Britain uniform. He was like, oh yeah, and I was like, fuck yeah, because that is my favorite. I have I bought a comic from McKay's of that outfit, Captain Britain punching or getting punched by like Nazi superhero man, and like they fight the entire issue. It's an Excalibur issue. I need to bring that Captain Britain. Captain Britain needs to come back, man. What's going on?
Yeah.
I guess what was this is, again, I'm not.
He was in Secret Wars.
Yeah, and then he looked really super badass in Time Runs. Was it Time Runs Out?
Leading up to Secret Wars.
Yeah, with he's got the goatee and the missing eye.
Yeah.
Not the goatee, like the super British beard, where like when a British beard gets long, it curls up in the end, and it's like sharp.
Kind of like
just,
King Cole.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm the last of them.
Yeah, the last of the Captain Britain Corps.
It's so cool. I haven't read it yet, but I picked up, whatchamacallit, the Secret Avengers, the Rick Remender Secret Avengers, where Captain Britain is a key player in it.
Yeah. Read Captain Britain and the MI-13 by Paul Cornell. That's a good one, too.
Yeah, I have the big hardcover of the original chronological Chris Claremont stuff, which is really cool.
Cool. And while you're at it, read some James Robinson.
Yeah,
books.
definitely.
Read Starman. Read Face to Face. Read The Saviors.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of reading comics, I've cracked open the first comic book that I've read in quite some time, since I am out of the three of us, I'm the one that reads the least comics. I'm finally checking out the Matt Fraction Hawkeye. One of my coworkers let me borrow volume 1 of the trade, and like I just blew through it. It was so good, and it had the wonderful issue 6 that everyone felt the need to send me when it came out with the Laserdisc reference, and it was cute. But like overall, it's like a really good book. I love the writing.
Yeah, there's no hyperbole in how like critically acclaimed that was.
Yeah, exactly. And what's great is like at this point in the comics, I know nothing about the Marvel universe. And it's so stepped away from it that I don't need to. Like, It would be nice if I had known, Kate, Hawkeye, outside of the context, because like she just pops in, she's an established character, and I'm just like, what? There's a female Hawkeye too? And then like there's a couple other characters that pop in that I'm like, oh, I've heard of Spider-Woman before, like stuff like that. But like it was so self-contained in its own little world that it was great. And I love some of the experimental narration that it uses. Like there's an issue where it's completely from a dog's perspective.
Pizza is my business.
Yeah, and business is good. And like it was beautiful. And I wish I could shake Matt Fraction's hand for just how well written it is. And I love the art too. The art fits so perfectly with it. And what's weird is like Volume 1 has an issue of Young Avengers attached to it, because it's a story about the first time that Kate and Clint. Thanks. I just read a whole like 8 issues of his story and I forgot his name. Yeah, Kate and Clint. It's where they first meet, and like it was kind of jarring because it's completely different style, and also it's at the end, even though it's something that happened, pre that story. But awkward timeline narratives were something that I had gotten used to, because Matt Fraction has a wonderful way of weaving around a story. But yeah, I'm sad that I waited, what is this, 2 years now to read it? 4 years?
It's been a while.
Yeah, no, 2012.
Yeah, that's right, because it was like, hey, let's capitalize on this character being in the Avengers.
Yeah, and it has an issue, dedicated to Sandy.
Yeah.
Which I was in New York for.
Yeah. Yeah. Rockaway Beach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
good stuff. I cannot recommend it highly enough, and I'm waiting to borrow Volume 2.
It's a good book. Speaking of Marvel, you guys watch Luke Cage at all?
I've caught the first, I think, 2 or 3 episodes.
I've only watched the first 3 myself.
Yeah, I think I'm like 6 in.
Yeah. It's really good. Although I'm in this stage right now where I like to kind of pace myself through shows, so I'm really only watching like 1 episode at a time, kind of almost as a throwback to like watching movies before or TV shows before Netflix and stuff like that, where it was only available 1 episode a week or something like that. I'm not quite waiting that long to watch each episode, clearly, but yeah, I'm kind of like, what, I don't want to sully it by watching it all at once. I want to kind of spread it out, enjoy it over a week or so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's really nice.
Yeah, you guys.
I really like Michael Coulter as Luke.
Yeah,
he's cool. I do think, based on what I've seen so far, maybe just because we've been spoiled so far on Marvel Netflix, the action or fight scenes aren't as good as, say, Daredevil or Jessica Jones.
I think there was a lot of, when I saw Luke Cage first throw down and Jessica Jones and the ease he took of taking guys down, that was really welcomed and really cool. It's still entertaining 6 episodes in Luke Cage, but it's, I don't want to say lazy, because obviously like a lot of work and hard work goes into it, but there's just it's not as,
it's muted, it's subdued.
Yeah. So it's going to be really nice to whenever Iron Fist comes around and shows how to throw down.
Well, I think they're also holding back a little bit, like they're giving like such a rich story. I mean, maybe this is just like,
oh no, you're right.
Half of it for me is like nostalgia of when I was living in Harlem. Although they make Harlem seem a lot more dangerous than. I mean, granted, I was in a very gentrified part of Harlem, so
they did the same
quote
thing
unquote dangerous.
They did the same thing with Hell's Kitchen.
That's true. Hell's Kitchen is very like hoity-toity almost now, but yeah, it's there's so much like just life in the story that's beautiful. It's not just shoot 'em up, but like but at the same time, Daredevil and Jessica Jones also did have a lot of that as well in their story.
Yeah,
but I almost feel like right now, at least in the first couple episodes that we're in, it's almost not focused on the violence and the action. It's more of like just kind of like sucking at the marrow of the tree of life that is Harlem and all of this.
That's definitely
if
true.
I may get kind of weird and ethereal with it.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. I mean the show is focusing a lot more on story more than any of the other shows so far. And again, that's not saying like you were saying the shows don't focus on story, but this is very
Character
much
relationships too.
Yeah.
Very much about the character, very much setting up a lot of things with Luke Cage. I think again his performance, all the performances are really great in it so far that I've seen, but it is nice to get like a moment of him like, kicking ass, but then it's so much about him. I think the show, better than Daredevil and Jessica Jones, is showing what it means and the importance of being a hero on a small scale better than any other show.
Yeah, no, I actually care more about the neighborhood.
Well, there's a couple scenes in general, and I don't want to say anything because you guys, I can't even remember what episodes they're in, but that it shows him just being a good guy just by his presence, and that's what I want to see in that show. Luke Cage is so much about that character, in the streets of Harlem and protecting that area.
I can't remember if I saw this on Twitter because because it's someone I followed, or maybe Jake retweeted it from someone, but someone said that Luke Cage is doing Superman better than most Superman stories. In the sense that he's doing just that, he's being a man of the people.
Well, it's funny you say that because it wasn't me, but that I see, first of all, just the idea of showing strength and being bulletproof, this show is doing very well. It's not like this slow-mo grandiose thing. It's just it ricochets off of him, and he doesn't even notice after a point. He gets a really fucking nice suit in one episode. You've probably seen pictures of it, and he gets shot a couple times, cleaning up after some guys and being a good guy and trying to save Harlem piece by piece. And he realizes not till at the end of the episode that he has bullet holes in his shirt, and he's like, shit. And the way that plays off is a really sweet, tragic, tender moment.
And I do like that his clothes get tore up from these bullets.
Yeah.
One thing that always kind of kind of tweaked my brain about Superman was that he almost never had a bullet hole. I get that his skin's not scarred or anything like that, but your clothes aren't going to survive that long.
It's funny because they showed a Supergirl season 2 promo with more Superman in it, which is cool. And there's a moment, just like in Luke Cage, I think you guys have seen by now, where someone fires a gun into his hand, and he just puts his hand back, and there's a bullet there, and he kind of winces because, again, it's still kind of it doesn't feel good, getting shot, but it doesn't, Anyway, there's a moment Supergirl, she catches a bullet, by just out of the air, I guess. Anyway, but yeah, it is. It's I see everything through the prism of Superman, and it is doing Superman better in the sense that just being this good guy. It's not trying to wrap up some deep meaning. It's just he's trying to be a good person. Yeah. And he's still struggling with, I'm not a hero. Is that necessarily a bad thing? No, but, he's trying just to be a better person. And there's an origin episode that is astounding. It's the framing device for it and the little nods they do to the character. Oh, it's so good. Probably one of my favorite episodes, if not so far. I feel like most of my favorite episodes, at least for both seasons of Daredevil and this season so far, are episode 3. For season 1 Daredevil, season 2 of Daredevil, and this season. My favorite episode of Jessica Jones was 8.
If I remember correctly, that's the best one for mine.
That's the one that I was like, holy shit. I love those moments where you're like, this is changing the game for superhero
where you just step back and you're like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
And that was that episode with Jessica Jones. I need to rewatch Jessica Jones because that show's really well done.
This does take place after Jessica Jones,
yeah,
right? Okay.
Which it makes that clear from the moment the show starts, which is which is good. Because watching the trailer I was like, wait a second, where does this take place?
I wasn't playing. It's been a long. I haven't rewatched any of Jessica Jones, and I wasn't paying absolute attention, and at a certain point I was like, wait, where does this fit in with the thing? And they're thankfully they're not wasting our time with a whole lot of exposition. But I was like. But I must have blinked during the right part of exposition where it gave the proper place in the timeline. But oh well. I
mean, being a Lethal Weapon fan, I mean we all are.
Yeah.
I cannot fucking wait to see Iron Fist and Luke Cage team up. I cannot wait to see their chemistry and the two of them team up. My God, I
can't wait for them to complain about being too old for it.
Yeah, watching the show Luke Cage. Because, again, Mike Coulter is just clearly just perfect for the role and doing such a good job. And I was like, I cannot wait to see. I have ideas. I don't know anything about the end of the show, but I have ideas of what I would love to see possibly happen with the potential Heroes for Hire thing. And I just can't wait to see it. I think that's going to be so dynamic and wonderful to see the two of them together on the screen.
I'm just getting started.
I'm just getting started. He said it, and I was like, yes. There's a couple lines. I don't want to repeat because I can't remember how far you guys got to, but there's a couple moments that are like that Luke Cage deals with, and a little kind of thing he says to some punk kid who pulls a gun on him. I don't know if you guys got to that scene.
Yeah,
where he's
like
like,
outside Crispus Attucks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's like, that is like
That was a great.
That's my
speech.
favorite. That's my favorite moment, I think, in any of the Netflix shows so far. It was like it was so fucking powerful and amazing. I loved it.
Always forward.
Yeah.
Forward always. Yeah. Did you? I think it takes place simultaneously with season 2 of Daredevil too, because you can see like the guys that Daredevil beats up in the stairwell in season 2, like the real cool chain fight. The first time Luke goes to the hospital, they're like in like gurneys, like lined along the hallway.
That's a cute touch. I like that.
So it's like, oh, okay, and like you see where what's her name, Dawson,
Night Nurse.
Yes, gets the cut that she's sporting in season 2 of Daredevil.
Yeah.
So nice little synergy there. But yeah, no, I've been digging it. You've watched another show that just premiered. It's called Westworld.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were talking to me. Yes.
I looked up for a second. I was like, I did.
Yeah, because we're both, Jake and I are kind of the same eye line for you. Yes, I watched the first episode of Westworld. Anyone that has heard me talk about the original movie knows that I'm a huge fan of it. And I was very excited for the new show to come out. Kind of curious how they were going to take it, what they were going to do. You know, if they were going to go right off the bat with crazy robots killing everyone, or if they were going to do some kind of slow lead up to it, or if it was even going to be a completely different direction.
Who plays the Yul Brynner version, or is that not?
So there's not an exact analog. At first, I thought it was going to be Ed Harris. Because like that's kind of how his character starts out.
He kind of looks like from the pictures I've seen.
But he's a human.
The fuck?
Yeah, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Who does because Evan Rachel Wood is in it, correct?
Yes, she plays a robot.
I like that.
Yeah. So what's really
her.
cool? What's really cool is
She's in True Blood.
Yeah.
True Blood. She's in True Blood.
Cyclops.
James Marsden.
Marsden. Yeah, he's in it, and for the first act of the
good.
first episode, you are watching him, you're following him enter into the town, and going and meeting Evan Rachel Wood's character, and they go off and they have their own little like story for like 10 minutes, and then out of nowhere Ed Harris comes in and just kills them both. And you find out that both of them are robots, and I was just like, "Oh shit!"
Nice.
So this is how we're starting. Okay, I got it. I'm in. We're the idea is that we are questioning reality. That's that.
I can see you're like having popcorn. You're watching by yourself. You're like, "Okay, guys, we are questioning reality, Chris.
Well,
here we go."
So when I went into it, I was
you look
like,
over and there's another Chris. You're like, "It's true, all of it."
and I'm like, "Did you just quote Star Wars?"
I feel like I'm like as big of Star Wars nerds as we all are.
Yeah.
And we all have our equal like weird fandom for Star Wars. I for some reason have latched on to the "it's true" all of it and just use it in every possible scenario
But
I
you know
can
what?
use.
I love that.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I will say real quick about Evan Rachel Wood. She is extremely charming and wonderful in Across the Universe, and her cover of "It Won't Be Long" as it's like as the schoolgirl like high school thing as like a love ballad is like one of my favorite moments in that movie.
I like her cover of "If I Fell."
Oh my god! Like her cover of that is like the best. I love her cover of that so much.
I never watched Across the Universe.
I watch it with the chapter select button very, very heavy.
Yeah. Be prepared to skip Bono singing "I'm the Walrus"
Yes.
on a psychedelic bus.
I will say,
I probably would.
It won't be long. If I Fell, Something, Strawberry Fields. This might be blasphemy, but their cover of "With a Little Help from My Friends," I might like more than the Beatles version because it is like so much fucking fun.
I like it better than the Joe Cocker version.
Oh, it's because of the I have a soft spot for the Wonder Years.
Yeah, I just don't like the Joe Cocker version because it sounds like he's drowning in his own neck juice.
Do they do Come Together?
Yeah,
I'm sure it's better than the Aerosmith cover.
Oh, speaking of Joe Cocker, real quick,
he drowned in his own neck juice.
Yeah, this will all come. This will all work together. Because again, I'm still on audio. What are we rating? What are we listening to? Audiobook. The Pete Townsend "Who I Am" autobiography.
Now who the fuck are you?
Who the fuck are you? I woke up in a Soho doorway. A policeman knew my name. But that song was written about the fact that like he woke up in a Soho doorway and a policeman was like, "Townsend, get up." But anyway, I got to the part. I'm up into like the 80s now, but there's a part in the book where he talks about playing Woodstock, and I work with a guy who went to Woodstock, and I was like, "Hey,"
So you're fact checking.
yeah. So I went up to him and I was like, "Hey, man," and he's like, I love this guy. I was like, "Hey, man, I'm reading Pete Townsend's autobiography." He's like, "Right on, man, right on." I was like, I got to the part where they played Woodstock, and he goes, "Oh yeah," and I was like, "Yeah," and he goes, "They played Woodstock, huh?" He goes, "It must have been a great time." And he's like, "All right, see you later." And like, he's like, he couldn't remember the fact that the Who played at Woodstock, so he probably, had a fantastic time playing there. But I don't remember where that story was going, and I'm sorry, I just shut this whole thing down. Chris, fix it.
So Westworld.
Yeah, Westworld. Something about I'm still listening to the autobiography.
But yeah, no. So I was really excited. Like the some of the teasers, I was like, are there gonna be robots that don't know that they're robots? Because like and like, is that what is going on? So like, it seems like the A story is like following some of the robots kind of slowly, kind of like gaining like actual consciousness, figuring out that they're following like storylines and like figuring out the repetition of their lives. But then you also have this B story with Ed Harris, who is talking about how he's been coming to this place for 30 years. And like, you get like little snippets of him just like kind of like interacting with the robots, the hosts as they are called in the show, and as if they know him, but each day or each cycle their memories are reset, so clearly they don't. And he's like kind of being a little cryptic, at least to the audience, about like, I know there's more stuff going on here at Westworld. I just have to dig deeper, and I'm going to like. He's almost going through the world as like a serial killer, kind of like a Siler character from Heroes, Zachary Quinto's character, like just kind of like dismantling things to figure out, like where the secret's hidden, and like he tore one of the robots, skulls open, and like there's right. You don't see him tear the skull open, but sorry, Jake made the metal horns, but like there's a map of some sort on the inside of the robot's skull, and I'm like, that's pretty metal. It just seems so cool, and I'm excited to see where it's going. Yeah, robots.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to it. I need to. Yeah, Ed Brubaker is a supervising producer on that show, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
You do anything interesting as well, Jack? We saw the Magnificent Seven.
Bum 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 bum. I'm not gonna do that again. Yeah, no. Look, the thing I liked about the Magnificent Seven,
just the action,
was the action,
and Denzel and Ethan Hawke do a good job.
Yeah, I mean Denzel, yes. Ethan, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Ethan Hawke's character was kind of weird, and he was making some.
There's
weird
that moment
choices.
in a cast of weird characters.
Well,
he hisses.
That he's like, hey, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing, bro?
Yeah,
like I get it, but come on now.
Yeah,
come on now.
Is this the movie that convinces you that Peter Sarsgaard sucks?
Well, I mean, look, I Peter Sarsgaard, when he's he didn't have much to work with. I mean, he is playing just the I am the Sarsgaard, kind of guy. And it's like, yeah, okay, fine. I did like the opening. The opening was pretty brutal. Just a boom, 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 boom. I was like, oh no, Matthew Bomer. Why couldn't she have been in this movie longer? Why couldn't she be one of the seven? I like the Comanche, the archer.
Red Harvest.
He was awesome.
He was really cool. There's that badass moment. I got like fucking like the chills where like he kills like the evil version of himself on the team.
the other,
yeah, the elder, and music from the elder, and he stabs me. He's like, you're a disgrace, and then kicks him off the thing, and I was like, oh shit. And you just watched that. You're there for the whole scene. The body hits the ground.
Yeah.
You're like, that was awesome. But the end is just like a shoot 'em up thing.
The action's fine. Yeah.
The action's fine. I'm tired. I am tired of like the easy shot, like the good guys just are perfect shots.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I like about
magnificent.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So here's something. So remember how the end of the Fantastic Four was like, it's fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Like, what did you say? It's fantastic. And then it ends. And this one, it's coming. She's like, they were magnificent.
And then they have the shitty, like, unnecessary CGI graves at the end. You're like,
and it's like, bum, 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 magnificent. And you're like, just fuck off. But, Yeah, I'm tired of like the easy again spoilers. I was surprised at some of the people.
I feel like my spoiler last week covered it all.
True, but there's
speaking of Peter Sarsgaard.
Yeah, but I was surprised at some of the kills and how they went down.
Yeah, I mean the same number of the 7 again. Fuck, you've got your spoiler warnings. Who gives a fuck? You've got the same number of 7 die in this film as they do in the original Magnificent 7.
But you thought Chris Pratt would have made it just because he's Chris Pratt, but no, he's out.
The Steve McQueen analog.
Yeah. But and like
so annoying.
Yeah, again, movie. I like Chris Pratt a lot, but
killed by the world's greatest
lover.
And the way the trailer makes it looks like Haley Bennett's there, but in the finished film, it's just a bunch of dudes.
That would have made sense for him to say that. He's like hitting on her and being kind of weird. Yeah. And I don't know, a lot of the payoff stuff it doesn't work at all. Yeah. Like I feel like you're like Chris Pratt gets shot like 4 times. And they're like, light my cigar. And he's like, I'll light your cigar.
I always was lucky with one-eyed Jack.
And the one guy next to us was like, yeah! I mean, I get, people enjoyed it. That's fine. But I don't know. The action was cool.
I like Western. I'm very easy to please on Western.
Oh, yeah. And Denzel Washington, even though it's so ridiculous, riding the side of the horse.
Yeah, that's the coolest thing.
If they would have busted out some, like, fucking Kanye during that third act, yeah, I would have been fine with it. Yeah. Because in the trailer, they have, like, like, the rapping.
Yeah, I feel I am the one that loved it. Or not loved, but I found...
Did you like it more than Suicide Squad?
Yeah.
Squad.
Oh, baby, I like it, Squad.
Oh, baby, I like it, Squad.
Yes.
Shimmy squad.
Yeah. Because Magnificent 7 was fun. Suicide Squad was silly.
Yeah. No, I agree with you that I like. Yeah. I would potentially, if I was with friends who hadn't seen it and they were like, let's watch it, I would potentially watch it again.
Mm-hmm. Or if you got like a free ticket to it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be like in the zone like, oh my god. But the shootout at the end was fun enough that I'd watch it again for that.
Yeah. I forget where it was going.
As the
person who loved the film.
I feel like if it had gone like full tilt boogie, in some places like
pretty full tilt.
But what I'm saying is like throw in some like Vincent contemporary rap and stuff like that. Like just be like, you know what, fuck it. It worked for Knight's Tale.
Tarantino and stuff. Yeah, I will say Chris. Like for a second, yes. I was like, oh man, like was he over exaggerating with Vincent D'Onofrio?
No, I was not.
Go back and listen to what he said. It was dead on. And look,
I got the impression right.
I was so I'm all for being bold, so I can't fault him for that because he went fucking bold. But it's like he's like I can't like it's like super high pitched and it is unbelievable.
Sucking on a helium.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. He's like, I got the Lord, playing the Lord. But there are scenes where he talks
Lord,
normal.
Forgive me.
Yeah, there are scenes where he talks normal.
Yeah.
He also goes out first.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, it's like the Sean Bean in Lord of the Rings.
Though.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you thought Chris Pratt took a lot of shots, I mean he did, and took.
He also, but he also like blows up.
Yeah, I will say like the Chris Pratt part. I was like, how many more times can he get shot and still get up?
Again,
but at the same time, I get it. It's Chris Pratt, and they have a plan. And then like as soon as they showed the card in his pocket, I was like, oh, okay,
yeah.
They made some sort of misdirect.
They're making it for mass entertainment and obviously for big blockbuster stuff, but like
kind of the same way that I was with like, where are all the people in this town? Oh right, I'm not supposed to care about that. I'm not supposed to be thinking about that.
The kids are hiding in the basement.
No, during the initial.
The initial.
When they're
right.
killing all the deputies.
Yeah. Like Chris Pratt, I feel like there's supposed to be like a redemption thing at the end. Because they're like, oh, he's a drunkard, but like if he was like an asshole. Like all throughout, and then like saves it. I don't know. I'm stupidly trying to rewrite a movie that I have no point.
Yeah,
doing
I mean,
that.
yeah.
But like,
you
what I mean?
If you wanted to Oscarize it, yeah, sure.
Yeah. But just cast. It could have. It could have had Henry Cavill. It could have had Tom Hardy. It could have had Nicolas Cage. It could have had
Jason Momoa.
Jason Momoa. He's get fucking ripped, dude. His Instagram.
I saw that. Yeah, he was pretty jacked.
As I say creepily, his Instagram. He's getting ripped for Aquaman, bro. Justice League, I guess, is done filming. And they just released today the name of the Batman film is called The Batman, which I like. People are like, oh, what is so simple? I like when people say The Batman. They refer to him as The Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the name of the film.
We kill the Batman.
Supposedly, Ben Affleck is a Mungo Jerry fan, which is to say huge Mungo Jerry fan of the New 52 Deathstroke. So Kyle Higgins must be pretty happy about that. Same with Justin Jordan.
Yeah. That's cool. Well,
did you do anything fun this week, Sam?
I DJ'd a wedding.
Ooh,
did you?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
A lot of 80s and 90s dance.
Yeah.
Did you play Heart?
I didn't play any Heart.
What about beans?
Yeah.
These bees.
I played Hall & Oates.
Oh.
Yeah.
Was it the
You
one?
Make My Dreams.
Yeah.
Did you play Chevy Chase and Paul Simon?
No, I didn't play Call Me Al.
What was the showstopper? What's your get him on? Let's do it.
Cotton Eye Joe.
Footloose by Kenny Loggins. Yeah.
Did you throw
That's
any
one where I jumped out on the dance floor.
What were the
'cause I
big?
had to.
Were any big curveballs?
Some Anthrax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's I Am the Law.
Yeah. Nah, nothing.
Here's Raining Blood.
Yeah.
Not really. Not really. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys got anything before we call it?
Now.
Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 2 opener was pretty good.
Pretty good.
It maintained the silly from last season. I enjoyed it. Lucy Lawless looks like she gets to do even more this season.
Yeah.
Yes. Wunderbar.
Yeah, man. Well, that's cool.
I think that's it.
Cool. Well, thanks again to James Robinson for coming on the show.
Mm-hmm.
The Saviors is out in comic book shops everywhere and on Comixology on October 26th with Through Image Comics. So pick it up. Do you know he just got announced to he's writing a Felix Leiter spinoff for Dynamite?
The fuck.
That was one of his secret projects.
Shit. We could have talked so much about how License to Kill is my favorite James Bond movie.
Yeah, or On Her Majesty's Secret Service is mine.
And Felix Leiter's
Not
in it.
Yeah.
It's all right. Mine's GoldenEye, and he's also not in that one.
Then fine. You would have been best friends talking about it. Felix Leiter is Union Jack. Shit.
Felix Leiter as Union Jack.
Which makes no sense because he's American.
Did I just
James Bond would be the Union Jack. Anyway, that's all for today, folks.
Yeah, so check out those books. And thank you again,
Yeah,
James Robinson,
seriously.
for coming on the show.
It was great.
It's been another Geek Out. This is not a Geek Out commentary at all. Thanks for another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
See you next week.
Thank you very much.
Good night, Eric Bana.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a new commentary every Monday. We've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual Catching Up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.